Once again, welcome everybody to the Kentuckiana Developers Group. My name is Glen Cates, and today I'll be presenting on Data API Web Integration from the standpoint of the non-web developer. So we'll get things started. Okay, so what I've done over the last month, and it really stemmed out of the presentation from last month of Michael Lane, did an amazing presentation on some of just the advanced, powerful things that you can accomplish with the Data API. He presented a web portal tapped into a FileMaker backend that was amazing, but it was far beyond anything I could wrap my head around. And I had been wanting to do some and had been working on some small integrations. I had previously done some PHP API integrations just to set up a payment web page for one of my clients. And I needed to convert that to Data API. And so I was just trying to kind of wrap my head around it from the small business practical, application. For me, I've got a handful of clients, and almost every one of them is, they've got a website hosted and it's built in WordPress, and they don't necessarily have an in-house developer for their website. They just contracted some Fiverr contractor to do it or something like that. So, and the kind of stuff that they were looking for is just the ability for a customer to go pay an invoice online. So that was where this all started. So what I've done is I've created this is just a sample database that's developed specifically for this demo. It's kind of a working invoicing database, but it just has the basics: customers, invoices, notes is something else that I put in there for a purpose. It's literally got no scripting in it whatsoever, except for scripting that's needed for this demo. And so it's just kind of a very skeleton-like invoicing sample. And what we're going to do today is I've got a bunch of PHP pages that go along with this demo. We're going to download the necessary downloads. We're going to upload them to the web server, and we're going to tap into those pages, and we're going to see how they work. So to start with, we need to make sure our server is prepared. So the FileMaker file, it's highly recommended that when you're using PHP API, that you create a entirely separate user for that purpose. So when we go to Manage Security, I've got an API user. And then for the purpose of this demo, I've just done a data entry privilege set, but because we're opening up the solution, basically giving it front door access to the world, you really would want to create a specific privilege set and really set up the security for that user to only be able to access exactly what is needed for whatever purpose you're using it for. The file, of course, needs to be hosted on a FileMaker server with a security certificate, and then it has to have the Data API enabled in the server, which you can find in the admin console. So the next aspect of setting all this up, and one of the things that I kind of struggled with and stumbled on, and because I didn't really, it wasn't made very clear in a lot of the resources that I was looking at. When we're using the Data API, you can basically, if you're looking at writing the PHP to use the Data API and purely writing all of the code involved, it is really complicated. Like for me, it was way over my head. But then I found out that there are a lot of very talented developers that have already written sets of tools and they're class wrappers that provide functionality that you can call upon. So the starting point is, and there are many of them out there, there's a lot of different wrappers. I ended up going with FMPDA by Driftwood, mostly because it was recommended by Michael Lane in his presentation. I haven't really explored any of the others because I've kind of just been focusing on learning how to use one to begin with. So we're going to go ahead and download that. That can be found at Driftwood Interactive. And all you have to do is come over and download the zip archive. And once we've got that downloaded, unzip it. I ran into this with this download that some of the files don't want to unzip, but we can just skip them because we don't necessarily need them. So essentially, this is going to be a set of functions that our PHP pages are going to call upon. And the functions are actually located in the FMPDA directory within the zip folder. And I'm also going to upload the documentation to my server because the documentation is PHP, so it has to be hosted on a server to be able to be read. So we're going to go ahead and do that at the same time. And those both are going to be uploaded to the root directory of my server. Now, before I do that, I'm going to go ahead and download the web pages. And these are the web pages that I put together for this demo. So we're going to grab that as well. So that's going to be, so we've gone from FMPDA and we've downloaded it. We're going to upload it to our root directory. And then we've gone to the DAPI page, downloaded the DAPI demo folder. But before we can upload that, we've got to make sure that we edit the credentials. Oops. And we'll talk about credentials a little bit more later. There's several different ways that you can pass your credentials when you're programming PHP pages. One of the most recommended is using .env, environmental variables. But that's another one of those places that got so, for instance, I would watch a video and somebody would say, well, all you do is you just, you open up Composer, you install Composer and you open up a command line and you install .env. And I'm like, wait a minute, what the hell is Composer? So I didn't know even the beginning of what to do with that. So, but we'll take a look at that later. So we're going to need the name of the database file. In this case, it's DAPI demo and the host. And right now I am hosting this demo database on my development server. Then the username and password for the demo are already set. So if you happen to be playing with this demo and you change the password or the username for the API, that needs to be changed in there as well. So now that we've got that saved, now all we need to do is upload these folders to the web server. So I'm using an FTP client to go ahead and log into my web server. This is on my web host, which is HostGator, but I've got an account that allows for multiple domains, multiple websites under the same account. The main account, what we're going to be looking for is the public HTML if I'm working with the main account, the main website. But in this case, I'm going to be working with a subdomain, which is demo.rgcdata. So that's where I'm going to want to put those, is right in the root directory of that subdomain. So I'm just going to grab all three of these. I'm going to upload them. And that's going to take a minute. So while that's uploading, I'm going to go over to the setup. And the setup, I just need to make sure that I have the server name entered. I'm sorry, the web server name, which is demo.rgcdata.com. And then for the documentation, I'm going to do the same thing. And this demo file actually has all of these same settings in a settings area. So if anybody were playing with this and just wanted to wipe out the dashboard, you could actually do that. But the settings are here. And so once all that's set up and once we finish the download or the upload,
So Ron, did you end up ENVing the security or not in this demo?
In this demo, I did not end up using .env because for the purpose of providing it for somebody to be able to play around with, I didn't want them to get stuck on not knowing how to install Composer. The other thing is that I was able to finally learn how to install Composer and install .env on my development server, but I still am working on how do I install it on my remote server, on my live server. And that was one of those things that, again, was, it turns out that what I needed was, I use a text editor. I use a Sublime text editor for doing my coding. And I Googled some videos about how to install Composer and .env on a WordPress website or whatever. And the videos would start with the presenter already having Composer or having their application open. And then we'd say, you just go to here to terminal, and they're like already logged in. And I'm like, what is he even using to do this? Well, it turns out it's Visual Studio Code. And I wasn't absolutely unfamiliar with that. So the first thing I had to do was learn how to use Visual Studio Code, and I'm still in the process of doing that. So in the end, I definitely plan on using .env for my live applications, and also this demo is going to be kind of an ongoing developing thing, and I'll probably include some instructions on how to do that if somebody would want to do that. So, all right, I think.
Ron, another question real quick.
Sure.
Unless I missed it, there's some particular extended privileges you have to invoke in the FileMaker file?
Yes, thank you. So yeah, when we go back to security, manage security, I did miss that part. So we need to go to the privilege set. In this case, I'm using data entry, and we need to make sure that FileMaker data API FMRest is checked. Very important, because it won't work without that. So thank you for pointing that out, John.
Thank you.
Kind of funny, because in that respect, it's like, as a FileMaker developer, I take the FileMaker stuff for granted. You know. Something else that I found that's really important and was a real difficult hump to overcome was during development. I discovered that when I'm writing PHP, if there's an error in the code, if I'm accessing it from outside of the local machine, it just gives me an error 500 or 505 or whatever the error code is. It does not tell me what the error code is. However, so what I ended up doing is I started writing all my PHP on my local server. I have a Windows server that's hosting, you know, my FileMaker server and FileMaker files. And I've actually got the website on that Windows server set up to be able to run PHP. So I run those files, I develop those files there and test them there. And when there's an error in the code, it tells me exactly what line it's on and what type of error it is. I couldn't imagine trying to troubleshoot, you know, writing that code without that ability to see where those errors were. So another part of that whole process of trying to get to the point where I could actually even begin to do this, I had to figure out how to set up my Windows development server to be able to run PHP. So that was a whole nother aspect that took a while for me to figure out. And I still don't know how I got it installed. I just kind of followed some instructions somewhere. And one day I was like, oh, it's working. So, all right, so it's uploaded. And now that it's uploaded, we should be able to, if all goes well, click on this. And actually, let me move that over. So there we are. Here's the demo PHP pages. So what I've done is, like, this is kind of the beginnings of a customer portal, but it also a little more than that. So if I click on customer list, I'm able to bring up a list of the customers from the database. And then I can scroll through them. I'm going to choose one where I have a single invoice into this customer. So I can look up a customer detailed view, and remember, these are completely bare bones, like just basic pages, because I'm not a web developer, but I have managed to be able to kind of get through all of the different aspects of the PHP. I can fetch and display data. I can edit a record. So I can come in here and I can actually edit the record, and we'll take a look at that. Let me go to my customers list, and who am I looking for? ABC Enterprises. How did I get out of sync here? No, let's do it this way. I don't have any search features in that one, so we'll find Benton. There we go, Benton Enterprises. So if I go to edit, it just any edit here and hit save. And then I go back to my demo database, and the save has been changed. The change has been saved, excuse me, got that backwards. There we go. So I can edit. When done, it'll take me back to the customer page, and then I can view an individual invoice. So here's my invoice right here. And this demo is actually set up to where I can actually do pay online. And I could enter a credit card number and an expiration date. And I can decide whether that's card number is too long. Actually, before I try and run that, I got to see if the demo that I'm working in has the settings. So in the demo, you can actually go to settings, and you can set up to process through either Stripe or authorize.net. And I do have my test keys in there, and it's on test mode. So this should actually come back as a successful process. Oh, I've got card code required. So I haven't gotten to the extent of being able to carry back the so stuff that I'm still working on, for instance, is when I hit process, it goes to another page to process it. And when it fails and I come back, I haven't got it set up to carry the credit card number and repopulate it, so you don't have to re-enter it. But there we go, payment processed. And when payment is processed, come in here and go back to my, let's go to, invoices, Benton Enterprises, and it's created the payment record and logged it in the database. So what's that's doing is it's running a script and returning a response. So I've actually, in these demo pages, I gotta hit the, in these demo pages, I've actually got, a number of different demonstrations of getting a list of records, finding a record by ID, running a script, editing. I don't have anything for deleting records, but I do have editing records. And so, and one of the other things that's in the demo as well is, we go to the index page again. I've got a contact form. This is one of the first things I wished I, that caught my eye about, it'd be really nice, instead of using this WordPress form, email submission contact form, I'd love to be able to have a contact form that would drop the message right into my database. And so the request has been sent, thank you. And then if we come over here to there it is right there. So, and I was hoping that somebody would download the demo file, because on my website, the demo file download is actually, oh, look at that. It looks like we have Dean. Oh, I'll have to look at that. It looks like Dean downloaded it, but somehow, oh, hey, been downloading a few of my stuff. Hope you don't mind that I just showed that. But.
Yeah, Michael has a comment that should be addressed at this point. Sorry about that. I've run into filling out forms for credit card compliance. So you're not supposed to save any type of credit card number information. So you might
Right.
run into issues trying to save that on your server just to repopulate the previous page.
Well, I would it run into issues if it was just capturing it in a button to post back to the previous page, like a back button that was just posting it?
I'm not 100% sure. I've just had to fill out accept credit cards through authorized.net. You have to go through this whole PCI compliance, and you have to say that you're not saving them anywhere. They're
Right.
not digitally stored anywhere. So I don't know if you would run into any issues with any compliance people if you were to do that.
Right.
Well, that's where you save it to a PHP variable.
Right.
Right.
Once you hit that submit save, so that if you get that error, you can bring it back with that variable, and
Right.
you would test, is that variable set? If it is, then put it into that field.
Exactly. Yeah.
So you're not
work with
storing it other than that session.
Right. And
You work with authorized.net and get a tokenization process in place.
Same thing.
That's
yeah.
just a whole nother layer on top of what we're doing here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Same at Stripe.
And Beverly, doing it that way wouldn't be any different than how we're processing it in the first place, because it's basically sending it in a post to the next page. So it's not storing it and carrying it back with just posting it back.
Right, but what we're saying, coming back, if you're posting it to the next page, and then you save it as a variable.
Right.
If there's an error, you can bring it back. That's my only comment.
So
Just
one of the
don't
things
save it
that,
in the database.
yeah, one of the things that enables you to remain PCI compliant is a lot of these places will have a widget that you can put on your web page that you type your information into, and it doesn't even go into your system. It's like a web page within a web page,
Yeah.
and it goes directly to their servers, and they return a token, and then you never ever touch the credit card information.
Yeah.
And so what you need to do is check with your processor to see if they have that available for,
Right.
for web pages. For FileMaker, all bets are off because there isn't an easy way to do that in FileMaker, I've
Yeah.
discovered. But if you're on a web page, you can do that.
Is that one
And
of
you
the
should
things
be able to
that,
do that here.
yeah. Is that one of the things that Claris is working on, though, is those kind of compliance issues where currently FileMaker doesn't pass compliance?
I don't know how they would do that because PCI compliance is really, really strict. I mean, there are companies that you cannot have a third-party product that's processing the credit cards. You have to use their terminals that are certified, and they have a certificate in there that only communicate with their systems, and they require you to buy those. And so running credit cards in FileMaker is like you're either out of compliance or it's really hard.
Right.
And that's true on SQL, because I did a lot of SQL development for web. Same thing.
Oh.
You have to return whatever they return you, and you cannot store anything else. You cannot process it yourself.
Yeah. And PCI compliance, though, is something that, like, if you're not PCI compliant, that doesn't mean you can't take credit cards. Right?
Well, you violate your agreement if you
Right.
are.
Right.
Yeah.
Most places will require you to be PCI compliant. If you're not, you're in violation of the agreement.
Okay.
Or I think they changed the fee structure too, so you're paying a higher percentage.
Right. That was my understanding, is that it had to do with fees and possibly insurance as well. But
Well, and your risk factor too. The other
Right,
thing
risk
with a
factor.
widget or something embedded, of course, you're on the web, you can embed, is that they take responsibility and they'll do all the CVV or whatever they're calling it on your platform.
yeah.
They do all that checking and so on for you.
Okay, so now that we've demonstrated the demo being uploaded, installed, and now it's working. So we actually have, API enabled web pages tapping into the FileMaker database. The next thing I wanted to do was kind of talk about how do we build those pages. And for that, I'm going to log into a development server, because as I said, for error checking purposes, and I'm sure there are better ways to do this. You know, the fact that when it comes to, let me just kind of clean out for now, and we'll start with something fresh. When it comes to setting up a development environment that'll run PHP and check the error checking and all that kind of stuff, I'm sure there are better ways to do it, but I'm not a web developer, so I don't know how to do those things. So I found what worked for me, which was to run it on my server, and that will give me the errors that I need. So let's see, where shall we start? Let's start with
2 questions, Ron.
Yep.
So is this Sublime? Is this a lot like Visual Studio Code? Similar text editor type concept?
I guess similar, but nowhere near what Visual Studio Code is. Sublime is just a much more
Simple?
simple, yeah, code editor.
BSC I've used, and that is quite an enjoyable tool, and it's free. So
Yeah,
I've
and
enjoyed that.
I've just downloaded it so I can learn how to use it. So I'm converting to that myself, but you know, I've been using Sublime this long, and you know.
Right. My second question is, so you've chosen to do all this in PHP, which was what the demo's about, which is great. There's also a move for a lot of people to JSON and not PHP, as I'm finding out. Do you have an idea how much different what you're showing us today would be if it was done with JSON and no PHP?
I do not.
Okay, so John, let's clarify. PHP is a web application.
Yeah.
JSON is the coding, and PHP can read JSON.
Okay.
JSON's the data.
Right.
But with, well, I guess I should say JavaScript then.
Well, yeah, but you can also put JavaScript in your web pages to process it. But you're right, yeah. But PHP itself has JSON functions that work very well.
Okay. I just been hearing developers saying that they're not using PHP now, which I got really sold on PHP. I like it, but I'm just wondering can this be done without PHP? We're just using JavaScript and other such.
I would hope PHP is not getting phased out.
I hope not.
PHP is a workhorse of this sort of stuff and is not going anywhere. But the answer is yes, you could do this in JavaScript or a dozen other languages, because it's, as long as you can do it in essence a curl, you can connect to the FileMaker server. The front end program, front end's the wrong word, but this programming here is transparent.
Yeah, obviously it's a naive question, but I figured it was worth on the table.
I can survive a little JavaScript, and I generally use that more for user interface, and the PHP I use for the workhorse for this sort of
okay, great. Thank you for taking that.
Yeah. One other thing I wanted to demonstrate with the demo, once you've got it set up, we've uploaded the documentation, so we can also access that directly for the FMPDA. And so what these the FMPDA, and I think originally was even developed to replace the FileMaker. You know, FileMaker used to have PHP API, and it came with, I guess you'd call it the class wrappers, or I'm not even sure the terminology.
Yeah, class wrappers library.
Right.
But it was a set of PHP functions that would read the XML, and this then just kind of takes that same concept but reads the JSON. Right.
So FMPDA was kind of designed to be a quick way that developers who had developed web pages using the PHP API to convert them to using the FM data API. So that was the first thing that I did. I had a couple of pages for clients that I converted, but I did find that there were some areas that I couldn't make the conversion work. And so, you know, I made the decision, I need to learn data API and just make the full conversion, because there's no sense in continuing to, you know, to figure out how to make it work with the coding is very different. the PHP pages, the calls, the way you grab the data and all that kind of stuff is very different. So, so all the demo pages are using the FMPDA API. So this is where you can find the documentation for all that stuff. So right now, over here, we're taking a look at the customer list. And so, you know, a couple of important things that we need to understand to start with is the PHP page needs to start with by starting a session. And every page needs to have that at the top of the page before any HTML or anything else. That becomes very important. By the way, I mean, are you guys aren't even seeing that, are you? Or are you? Are you seeing my server?
Yeah, we are, but it's tiny type. If you could zoom that up, that would be helpful.
Okay. Is there a way I can?
Perfect. Perfect.
There we go. Okay. So one of the other things that maybe if we have time today, I was going to talk about as well is how do we make all this work in like a WordPress website? And so I was working on doing that, and I found some ways to, with plugins, to insert PHP coding in the WordPress web pages and everything. And I got it working, and I thought I had nailed it and everything was great until I looked at my FileMaker server, and every time I accessed a page and every time I refreshed a page on that WordPress website, it created a new connection for the data API. So it was like I had, 50 users connected under data API all at once. So what I found out was that you have to, you have to begin with that session start. Well, the thing is in WordPress, when you're using these plugins, you're injecting the PHP into the middle of the page. So you actually have to edit the template page or create a special template to be able to make sure that session gets put in there. So it's important because otherwise, if it's not wrapped in a session, then every time a call is made to the data API, it will establish a new connection, get a new token. So there's the basic HTML, and then this is where the FMPDA folder comes into place. The first thing we need to do is we need to call, require that folder so that it brings in all that functionality. And this is where I had been working on the .env. So this actually works in this page on this server, but I don't have it working on the live server yet, or on the server out on the web. So I just kept it there. So what I've done essentially for authentication is I just simply put this little page together to set the variables to the database host username and password, so that each page that I build can call that. Another way that can be done was actually saving them to session variables. And that makes sense if you know exactly, like if you're, and the reason being is that you want to have just one place that you have to make those change. If the username changes or the password changes, you want to be able to just change that in one place. If that were contained within this page, then I'd have to have this on every single page. And the other way to do that is you could do session variables and set those variables on the first page that you come to, but that's provided that it's a situation like, for instance, I had an invoice where you go to the invoice and then you would go to a payment page. Well, of course, you can't go to the payment page until you go to the invoice first. So I could set that in a session variable and then just call it from the next page. But in this case, I ended up putting it in a separate little file and just including that. And then we make the call to establish the connection to the database. And this is where the FMPDA does the work for us, where it's going out and it's accessing through the data API and it's getting that token. The token is something that has been talked about a lot when you talk about the data API. That was the whole reason for, one of the big reasons for going from the PHP API to the data API is because that token system provides a much better security system. And so it establishes a session and creates a token, and then it reuses that token until it expires. And anybody can correct me if I'm wrong, if I'm misunderstanding that, but that's my understanding of exactly how that works. So the FM data API does all that work for us. We don't have to worry about managing the tokens or anything like that, because that's what the FMData API does. And so then we come down and we have layout. We specify the layout, and then we put together some some options, and all of this stuff can be found in the documentation. So when we go to the documentation, we go to the FMData API. One of the first things that we can go to is we can see where all the different options are that are kind of shared options between all the different functions. And then when you go to each function, if it has specific options, it'll tell you. So we're using, what is it? Get records. That's the one we're using. So there's the get records. Now this, I had a hard time with this because this is the documentation still fell short for me, because I'm trying to put together PHP pages. And when I come to the documentation, I see all of this, but then how do I get the data? It doesn't show me anything about how to get the data with the PHP. So we made the call, and we've set a limit of 10 records per page. So it will only bring back 10 each time. And then we use get record to go to the layout and grab the records. Then it brings the response back. Well, here's the thing that really, really helps me more than anything else, I think, was it's got a logger. And so when I run this with the logger uncommented, I get to actually see the structure of the JSON being sent back. This was a game changer for me, because now I can actually visually see the data that I've just brought in. And from there, then I can figure out how to use PHP to drill down into that data from the response. And that's where I can start coming in and grabbing customer field data, customer number, and that all comes in from going to customer, going to the array, and I'm looking at field data. It's record. Oh, that's my for each. Sorry about that. So this is a for each statement. So the first thing I had to do with that is I had to be able to kind of pull out an array so that I could loop through all the different customers. I had to put it into, I had to take the customer JSON and loop through each one and do a for each loop so that I could come up with the list of customers. Yeah. So, all right. So when I go to the invoice page, or the customer detail page. So let's take a look at that. So now I've gone to the customer detail page, and if I want to pick out and get just one customer, what I'm doing is a find request. And I'm sending it an ID to find on the ID, and I've passed the ID through the link. And then I do the find request. And so here on the customer page, now I've got there's the data returned from the customer page. So in this case, I'm grabbing, we're only looking at one record. So I'm grabbing from the first record, I'm grabbing all the, the customer name, the customer address, city, state, and zip. So I'm looking at, the first record, which begins with 0, data field, and then customer. After that, I want to loop through all of the invoices for that customer. So the first thing I had to do is I had to identify the portal data. So I needed to come and find the portal data for the invoices portal. And this is something else that I took for granted as far as from the FileMaker side. Every field that we're going to access with the data API has to be on a layout. And so what we normally want to do is create a layout specific to just the API so that we can add in those extra fields. You can actually have them off to the side and everything. But when you're using the API, it's kind of important to regulate how much data you're bringing back. And so if you've got a portal that's unnecessary for the API, but it's on that layout, well, that data is going to be included in that package that's brought back by the API. So kind of keeping minimal layouts that only have the fields necessary means you're only carrying the data necessary. So you're not having overloaded payloads coming back. So on this, what I had to do is I had to grab and create an array out of the portal data. So I came down here and invoices equals response data, portal data, invoices. So I just selected that array, and then I looped through that and created the a list of the invoices, which is just one in this case. And then when you go to the invoice page, I'm doing something very similar. I'm finding the invoice by ID, and then I'm grabbing the list of line items so I can populate the line items. And then when you go to the payment page, that's when we actually use this is when we're going to actually fire a script. So the script has to have a layout. It has to take place on a layout. And the script can actually, this is just finding that same invoice so that it can populate the data for the payment page. It's the actual response page is the one that fires the script. So, I don't know why I keep opening these up. So response is the one that I'm looking for. So in response, we're firing a script, and I can actually carry, oh, that's not the right response. It's process. So I generally do pass parameters in FileMaker by using a let statement in the script parameter. I'm able to actually create that same let statement here in the parameter for the PHP API. And so I can actually run the script with the same parameter, setting my variables in the parameter the way I would, you know, if I were sending it from a button in FileMaker. But it takes place on a layout, fires the script, reads the parameters, and the script performs, and you can actually get the result back from exit script, and you put the resulting JSON in the exit script. So let's see, payment. So what we're doing is we're firing the script, and then we're putting the result in JSON, and I can carry whatever results I want to carry back and just format it as JSON. And so if we go back here and we look at we'll do our logger here as well. If I just refresh this, I can see that I have script result right here, and then I can pull that. Or if the result is a found set and there are records at the end of the script, it will actually bring back the record as well. So one of the things that I did in another script is just to kind of eliminate that payload, I actually made it so that it went to a 0 found set after the script. So it would just bring back the result, and I wasn't carrying all this unnecessary data. One of the other things that I was able to do is contact page. In the contact page, this is where we can demonstrate actually saving a new record. And of course, that's where that result page came in, the response page. So this is what it looks like when we're creating a record. We're passing it parameters of what fields and what to set them to. Then we come through and we can create the record and get a response. But overall, what really changed everything for me was just being able to visually see this data, because before I was able to do that, I had no idea what this data was looking like. I just kind of was trying to figure out how to pull this invisible data into a page with PHP without an actual reference point of being able to look at what the data looks like. So this logging system in FMPDA is really great.
And you can always, with PHP, I find the echo statement is my friend. So this is awesome to see everything all in one place. But if you're really just concerned about one variable you're trying to display and it's not working, you can just echo out that in your primary code.
Yeah.
And, you know, it makes your web page look crappy, but it's debug, you know, and it's telling you what that really looks like. So
yeah, and I definitely use that, especially, you know, just being a beginner at trying to do this. I was getting the syntax wrong all the time. I was grabbing, you know, trying to grab the JSON. Sometimes I would get it wrong. So it was, you know, I would always try and I did a lot of echoing out just to make sure that I was pulling it correctly and everything. The other thing that I've done on this, let's go back to customer list. In these demo pages is I added another way to do this. As much as I love this logger, it actually helped me to see it this way, which was a little clearer to me. So it's just a matter of preference of what, you know, how you prefer to see it. So I've got a couple of different options in the demo pages for doing that.
Yeah, it took me a while to get my head around how PHP, that the syntax for how they deal with arrays.
Yeah.
And so often I would start at the very, much like you did there, start at the high level, and then you just start building it down, and like you do in JSON, right? It's one key, one key, one key, one key, and just get where I needed to get to. It's always the stupid stuff that, you know, it's like you say, you start at record 0 instead of record 1. It's like, oh yeah, that's where I'm today, you know, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, and
the other thing, and I think this, if any of you are brand new to the data API, you know, as Ron said, having a dedicated page so that your all of your fields are there, but also not too many of your fields are there. But just remember that anytime you change inside FileMaker, a field name or a layout name that the data API is calling, that's going to break everything. Yeah. So that's another reason, you know, we don't change field names too often, but sometimes I change layout names when I'm just reorganizing whatever. It's like, and I just, you know, so caution on that, you know, you can make these changes inside FileMaker and everything resolves, but this is external to FileMaker and it won't resolve unless you.
Well, I was doing a lot of PHP, and this happened with SQL servers as well, is you create a mapping document, and your mapping document is where you can change it once. So if you've called a field 10 times in your PHP, your mapping document is looking, so what was that? And it actually finds the field by name where I only had to change it once in my mapping PHP document.
Good idea.
One of the things that I actually found some interesting stuff, for instance, I think it's the contacts page. Let's see if it's the contact page or the response. Yeah, I'm actually using the actual layout for that one. But I can use a utility layout for that as well. Because I always keep utility layouts. Actually, I'm not 100% sure that I've got that set up with a utility layout, but yeah, and this is a bad idea. I did it just because I was building it and everything and just kind of still experimenting, but this is a bad idea because in this particular database, I'm using a menu system that I've built that's dynamic modular menu. This menu actually comes from the layout list, and it's designed to be able to be modifiable. So if I wanted to take this notes page and I wanted to put it under the settings section instead of the main section, then I could come in here and change that layout name, and it'll change where that layout falls in the menu system. So something I'm really proud of too is this dynamic modular menu. But now that I've just changed that name, that code is broken. Yeah. So definitely not a good idea, and I'll have to change that. As I said, I'm kind of doing this demo as a developing thing, so that's probably one of the things I need to get back to. I meant to make a dedicated layout for that and just never got back to it.
And you can map your layouts too.
What's that?
I said you can map your layouts too, like you did with the fields.
Yeah.
So where you've got it one place, then you have to change it, but you can call it throughout the whole set of PHP without having to go back to every page and find it.
Yeah.
And you can document, I guess, I'm just thinking on the fly, but document some obscure fields as well. Just, some of this stuff, you may want a field that's specific about communicating back and forth to the web page, a status or a time or whatever, a flag.
Yeah.
And, when you got your FileMaker hat on, you're not thinking about the website necessarily and so on. And so I think that's a great idea, Beverly. I like that.
Yeah. Yeah. And we're really spoiled in that respect. That FileMaker is such a wonderful thing that I could change a field name and it changes every reference to it throughout the entire file. I never have to worry about it. But now I have to change the way I think when I start doing this PHP API, this web integration stuff, because it's going to be important that I remember. Like my little database that where I'm logging the downloads and my contacts form goes into and everything. Now that it's hooked up to my website, I'm always working on that CRM. And if I'm not careful, I could break those links and break those pages without even remembering, so I'm going to have to kind of change my thinking and make sure that I'm very mindful of the fact that if I've got PHP pages accessing the database so that's why, best case really is to just create dedicated layouts that are never going to change. And then changing field names is just going to have to get used to thinking twice before I change that field name. So. That's where we're at with all this stuff. So something else, if anybody's interested, that I was going to maybe get into, because I know at some point, I think it was when Mike was presenting that the question we had talked about, so how does all that translate to, a WordPress website? I want those pages to be wrapped in that WordPress template and that theme and be able to just integrate nicely with my WordPress site. So are we game? Would you guys like to dive into that a little bit?
Well, I think you're going to answer or address this, Ron, but one of my experiences has been doing exactly what you've done, where you can show the variable names and what the structure is, and just mock up basically a functional page. It's not aesthetic, it's not user ready, but you can hire people for relatively inexpensively. They can make that stuff pretty. They can do all the bells and whistles, put the JavaScript on it. They can make it, pop and shine and glitter and all that. But if, we're taking care of the data, and that's the real complicated part. And so this is a great bridge to get you, I won't call you 90% there, but it might be 75% there to have that web page done. Yeah. I've done that on a number of times, sometimes with offshore developers, sometimes with domestic developers.
Yeah, I think you've done really well, Ron.
Yeah.
And you've covered the, start to finish without going like, huh? What did he say?
Well, good.
Yeah.
I felt like I was stumbling my way through it, but
no, this is very good. It's a great start.
Yeah.
Well, what I did for WordPress when I was doing a lot of that, was I would just upload to my website data, and it could be column, CSV, and then I let PHP process it. So it would stick in the format of the WordPress, but I had a particular page that was kind of just an inset of the rest of the stuff, and let the PHP process, and that worked out pretty well. And you could use the same concept where you're using the data API with JSON, and it just let it process. To me, that was the easiest than trying to get really complex. Because WordPress itself has ways to put a hook in there. So you're just saying, you know, display this PHP page within the rest of it.
Yeah, I mean, putting it into a WordPress site is really, it's not that hard at all. It's just a matter of using a plugin.
Yeah.
The trickiest part that I found was just understanding that I needed to create a modified template that had the session start
Right.
to the page. But other than that, the only thing to kind of keep in mind is, you know, insert PHP code snippet is the plugin that ends up being the easiest way to do it. And then when you add a new snippet, let's call it, we'll do the contact form. Let's see, do I have? Still have that on my desktop. So.
Hey, Ron,
Yeah.
I have to run to another meeting at 1 o'clock. On the hour. But I want to thank you for the presentation. It's great. And I want to just comment, you know, you said it's your first presentation.
Yeah.
I think you have excellent presentation skills. So
Thank you.
this is a good first session. You can build on what you're doing. You can be a very good presenter. I'd love to see you at one of the conferences speaking.
I certainly hope that I'm able to do that moving forward.
Yeah. And I learned something. Thank you, everybody. I'm sorry I have to bow out, but my boss is waiting for me.
Thanks, John.
Right.
Have a great day.
You too.
So with the plugin, what I'm doing is basically I'm just grabbing the PHP. So I don't need the HTML headers or anything like that. I'm just grabbing the PHP code and then creating the snippet. And then when I create my page, all I have to do is grab the short code and then I can add a new page. Put in the snippet and then I can publish it. So a couple of things are going to happen when I try to do this though. One, the PHP is looking for the our little API file that tells it the database and the username and the password and everything. It's looking for it in the root of the server. And we have it in a subdirectory currently we have it in subdirectory of data or DAPI. So what it's looking for is it's looking for this. So we need to make sure that's in the root. Now, refresh. Oh, well, I should just be able to go to oops. Did I publish it? And then we have our contact page. So finding that plugin really kind of made that easy. And if I'm by just putting the raw code in, the couple of things that I have to remember if I'm trying to transfer these pages into my my WordPress website is, you know, these pages have a really minimal CSS style sheet, you know, that goes along with it. But those styles aren't going to work in the WordPress site. So any additional styling needs to be done in inline styling within the HTML tag.
You try just removing your CSS and letting it use the WordPress CSS?
That's what it's doing, yeah. So when
Oh, okay.
I pasted this page in, I only pasted from here on down. So the call to the
Oh,
CSS,
okay.
yeah. So I'm just grabbing this. That way WordPress is using its template to populate the header and all that kind of stuff, and it's grabbing the CSS. But that's where that template file actually ends up having to be. So what I really have to do to make, and actually,
Unknown caller.
I need to do the response page. Save that. Code. I need to grab the response page. Throw that into a snippet. One thing I have to look for in this, though, is that any references to any links to go to another page. Do I have any links in this page? Nope. Okay, so I create that. In my actual form page, I'm going to change the action on the form. This needs to change to, actually, I think that update. I go back to my form. Fill that in. Let's cross our fingers and see if it actually works. Nope. Response. Oh, it's, yeah, I got the action wrong. So this needs to be. Response. Oh, and I didn't get a response. So something's still not right. But all this does work. This is how I've got how I've got it set up to do the download page and the contact page on my website. So in the end, it ended up not being that hard at all to do that. The only other thing that needed to be done to be able to get it to work properly, and actually, let's see if.
Can you paste the link to that WordPress plugin
Let's
into the
see.
chat?
Yeah. I don't know. I don't know where to find a link to it, but I mean, I can put it in there. So
Well, that view details should be a link,
okay.
if you can copy that. No, don't go to it, just copy
Copy
it.
the link.
Yeah.
But one of the things to watch out for with these code snippet plugins and just keep track of is that they will run every time that WordPress page loads. So, it's likely, for example, that it is grabbing a token from FileMaker. It's not doing an upload or a download, but it's going to grab a token. So some of these snippet plugins, and I realize the one I referenced does not have this feature, and I don't think this one does either, but you can restrict when that code runs to specific pages. So you only want the form code to run, well, or the FileMaker code to run on a page that's doing FileMaker reporting, on the one that's all the information and pricing or whatever other services you're
Right.
providing. You don't want it to run. That's just an extra load on your server and perhaps more data that's going back and forth.
Yeah. Yeah, on any page though that doesn't have the codes, the short code on it, it's not going to access the server or do any of that kind of stuff. But yeah, I've actually noticed too, like if you really kind of take a look at these pages load really fast compared to my WordPress page. WordPress is heavy as heck. Like it's, regardless of, even besides having that in there, WordPress websites are pretty slow because they've got like a monstrous amount of stuff going on in there.
You mentioned, and of course, speed is really important, but if you do want to use some of the fancy stuff that's in any of the WordPress form plugins, and they have a lot of sophistication, do remember that you can access WordPress data through the WordPress API, and it's just, the reverse of this process. But the data that comes out of WordPress more often than not is serialized. And that's an entirely different data format. It's like when we all struggle learning what JSON was. Well, it's the same thing with serialized data. But the data is all there. You can go into the SQL databases that are behind the WordPress, and it's obviously fields and columns, but or columns and tables. But the data that's inside there is serialized. So it's just another little language and another translation to deal with.
Oh, I know it.
Yeah, I've noticed that WordPress uses a lot of the entity attribute value storage. So they're not really columns and rows. It's,
Right.
Attached to the entity is like the relationship. And then the attribute is the field name and the value is the value. So it's like,
Well, and
you
serialized
have to
data,
grab everything. Yeah.
Yeah, and serialized data is, the next 48 characters are going to be this field.
Yeah.
And then it just goes on to the next one. And it is what it is. It runs in SQL, but it's not all structured data like we're used to.
Yeah.
Trying to see if I could figure out where my error was, but
I did check because I was unsure. I went to your site, what is it, wherever it is, demo RGC data,
yeah,
and tried to see if I could load your DAPI.php file directly to see if that was a security issue. And WordPress on top of that and how they've set up HT access prevents that file from being seen. So that's good.
That's good to know, because that was certainly a question I had. In the beginning, I was really fixated on having to be able to use the environmental variables because, that was the more secure way to go. And then I think I watched a video or something and saw that even WordPress is storing all their credentials in PHP pages the same way that I'm doing it here.
Right.
So that kind of gave me a little confidence that, well, if that's secure enough for WordPress to be doing that, then I guess we're okay. But now I understand. It's nice to understand why, because they've added an extra layer of protection against that. So
I think that ENV function, again, I'm a single developer, standalone guy like you, I suspect. And the ENV is a way of protecting your credentials from other developers on the team or contractors or those sorts of things.
yeah,
It's not the primary, website security
Right.
that's protecting.
yeah. And I think one of the other things that a lot of the PHP developers that, again, I'm watching a lot of tutorials, and these guys are putting this code together, and for them, it was a good way to keep those credentials from being separate from their files that they're going to upload to GitHub and make publicly available to everybody.
Right.
So, yeah. So, yeah. So I basically put this together because I thought it would have been so nice to have something like this just to get started with, just something to tear apart and get some examples of, getting the data, editing a record, creating records, running a script, I would have loved to have had something like this to start with a few months ago. So I figured I'd put it together and make it available. And
Yeah, remind me what security you had on that user. Was it data entry only?
yeah,
Okay.
yeah, which is not the recommended way to go. It's one of
No.
those, yeah. There's still,
Because a lot of times I, to make it extra secure, I allow only to grab the data, and then I might do something where I'm processing it otherwise within PHP and kind of cleaning it up. And that's a separate part, sort of separated, and either, pushing it to the MySQL and then letting FileMaker grab it, so that the data is a lot more secure that way. You're not allowing anybody to just submit anything.
right.
Like your little form is great, but they can put some crap in that you don't want. And if you can grab it at that point with a PHP and push it into MySQL, or do some serious cleanup before it ever ends up in FileMaker, that I always feel better, because I did the same thing even with MS SQL and MySQL and PostgreSQL and all that. You don't ever want to accept anonymous data. You can avoid it.
Yeah. Yeah, I think I just put the contact form tied into my little CRM. I made that live just a couple days ago, and so far the only submission has been spam.
Some of the FileMaker forms, I talked about the difficulty of the serialized data, but some of them will also do a webhook. And webhook's an entirely different topic, but webhook is a way of getting data also over. You need another little set of PHP code that's standalone, but WordPress would talk to the webhook on your server, that would talk to DAPI, and the data goes in. And most of those form plugins in WordPress do take care of getting the crap, the injection and all that stuff out of fields, so that if it's a text field, it's only text, and no special characters or whatever it might be. So
yeah, webhooks is still I still don't understand what a webhook is. So
I'd be happy to talk about that too.
Yeah, well, there's a presentation idea.
Yeah. So, and again, I don't know the audience real well here, but, part of, and maybe you're finding this same thing too, Ron, is, WordPress is what the world is using.
Yeah.
You can do fully custom code and all that stuff, but WordPress is the kind of the FileMaker of the web presentation world, and lots of plugins and lots of things that can be added in. And so if you're trying to sell to customers, or in my case, support customers, I do nonprofit work, so I don't sell everything, but this is a place that you do need to figure out how to interface to, either to get data in or to display data back out. The idea of separating the display of data from WordPress and having to use, any of the not using your FileMaker platform to actually display display data to end users, gives you huge scalability, right? We're not limited to what you're licensed to, or what the server capacity is, or the 51st person to sign on, or open connections, or that kind of thing. So this little bit of separation is really, really powerful. And, a lot of people would say, well, let's just do that with Zapier or some other, in-between term or tool. And this is where webhooks come in. Webhooks are, quote, free. You got to have a little piece of code running on your server, but Ron just showed us how to do that. But you don't have to pay per transaction. So that's important over the medium and longer term too.
Yeah, and I think something else that has become, it's so commonplace is the expectation of, some kind of user portal, some kind of customer portal where people can access their own invoices and their customer data and stuff like that is, I guess I kind of see that as a level of professionalism. Like when I'm working with a company that has a portal on their website where I can log into my account and I can get to my customer information. Like, I feel like that company's, you know, pretty well put together. And I think it's expected these days. Like, I think most I'm kind of working with hopefully landing a contract for a client coming up here. And one of the things that they had on their request list was a customer portal to be able to track their activity and stuff like that. So this is another reason why I've kind of been diving into this, to make sure that I'm capable of doing that for that client.
With the web direct, you'd have to restyle everything to match their brand.
Oh yeah.
Right? And in this case, you just throw the data at them, or at you at the other end, and just pick up that WordPress styling. It's transparent, all but transparent. So there's a lot of pluses to this.
Yeah, to have it just integrated with the WordPress site. I mean, that's, again, it's kind of a must. I mean, I don't think anybody wants their customer to go to their website and see one style, and then when they get to their customer portal, it's just a completely different animal. And I, originally when I started working on this, and with no idea about whether I could even integrate it with WordPress, I did a couple of pages where I just tried to mimic the general style of the pages, and kind of do a mimic of the header of the client's website and stuff. And it was just, God, it was so not fun. So
every website pretty much has a database behind it, and WordPress uses SQL a lot. So where you get the content can be FileMaker, just like any other database.
Yeah.
So it's an easy paradigm to imagine.
Folks, I've got to sign out. I got to jump to another meeting. Appreciate the time today. Look forward to seeing you next time.
Thanks, Dean. Lots of good
Dean,
stuff.
thanks for coming.
Take care.
Thank you, Ron. I got to run too.
All right, John.
Talk to you later.
Jonathan.
Yes, and I have to go too, and I got in late because of a tax deal. Okay, great. Not that I understand.
It was a really good presentation. I think you, covered a lot of the basics for people that are just starting out, and, covered all the gotchas too, which is really important. It's like, this is going to bite you.
Yeah.
Here's why. So it was very good.
I meant to.
Do you work with WordPress a lot?
More so lately, but not really. Like, I'm in the same boat. I'm trying to learn that as well as PHP, as well as, but I've been trying to, I built my own website, but that was about it. And then I built a couple of small websites for various reasons. But every time I get in there, I mean, I find WordPress to be aggravating as heck.
Oh,
too.
yeah. Oh, yeah.
It can be really difficult. So I'm just trying to overcome the learning curve there as well. So I was just really happy that I was able to, integrate the few things that I was, and now I feel much better about, if that need arises, I know I can do it. So a lot of my pursuits right now is just about making sure that I've got more tools in my toolbox so that I can,
And that's what I did. I started web coding at the same time I started FileMaker.
Yeah.
So then I ended up getting the SQL information that I learned, and the web information that I learned with different web apps, not just PHP, but other ones. And, it did even some basic web pages that had no database backend at all.
Yeah. Well, funny enough, 25 years ago, I was a web developer.
Yeah.
Like, that's what I did, but that was before CSS. It was before.
Oh yeah.
As a matter of fact, at that time, my whole kind of claim to fame about what I did at that time is I wrote everything in Perl. I had all kinds of, and I did amazing things with Perl, and had a whole.
We had some good CGIs.
Yeah.
That did all this stuff. Yeah.
I had a whole suite of little Perl scripts that were global to a server with multiple websites on it, and they each had their own config. So, picture galleries. Honestly, I was doing a lot of the user editable website stuff long before MySpace, Facebook, and all that stuff came out. But I just, had no idea how to go anywhere with it. And my life took some other turns and I went in other directions and did other things. And then 10 years later, somebody asked me if I could build them a website. And I said, sure. And I went to go do it. And I was like, oh my God, everything has changed.
Yeah.
Curl doesn't even exist anymore. What's going on? So
It does, but not like it was.
So, and at that time, and that was about 10 years ago, when I was like, okay, what is this PHP stuff? What is going on here? Everything's changed. And then I kind of said, yeah, I don't think I can't build you a website after all. And then I didn't get back to it again until a few years ago. And then all of a sudden it's all this WordPress. And it's like, everything in the world is running on WordPress, and I don't know anything about that. So once upon a time I was a web developer, but today I would absolutely say I am not a web developer.
Yeah.
Well, I suppose we could probably wrap it up.
Thank you very much. That was great. I did put that full
You did. I saw
link
that. Thank
to
you.
that plugin so that you get right to it.
Yeah, I was having one of those frantic moments where my brain wasn't working.
That's okay. And it was something that I'd used, and we're talking 20 years ago when I did it probably. Was different, but it was the same concept as you have just an add-on that allows you to inject your own PHP code. Like I said, it's just a matter of uploading the comma separated values.
Yeah.
My PHP then did whatever it needed, and I didn't have to do anything with the, the site as it was. And WordPress was just happy accepting it and looked great and worked well, and the client loved it, and they could change what it was, a calendar, and they could change it in their FileMaker database. And when they hit export, it exported that set of CSV, hit the button that said upload it to the server, and it uploaded that new set of thing and refreshed the page, so their calendar was always up to date without too much fuss. And that was before Data API, of course, but the same principle.
I'm trying to remember the first time I ever experimented with hooking a website into a FileMaker database. FileMaker had its own special language for that, like its own HTML stuff. Yes.
CDML. Yeah.
I actually managed to accomplish that way back when. That was, God.
Yeah, a lot of developers who said I'll never do web took to CDML pretty well, and it was not that difficult with that homepage interface thing that allowed you to do some of the drag and drop.
Yeah.
And that was really easy for people to accept. And okay, I don't have to know it.
Right.
It just kind of does it for me.
Yeah. I actually ended up hand coding it.
I did too. Yeah.
God, that must be 15, 20 years ago now that I did that. That was
back in the day. There was, before the PHP API, we used to use Lasso, which is very similar to PHP.
And Lasso is also similar to CDML, but it was just a little more complex.
Yeah.
Same company created both of them.
Yeah. Yeah, that was during the time of my initial introduction to FileMaker, and I believe it was FileMaker 7 or something like that. And so I worked at a company that was a call center, and they had a FileMaker division of, I think 3 guys that did the FileMaker development for their call center, ran on FileMaker, and I did the websites, like I was the web guy, and they wanted to be able to give some reporting to their clients about their products, sales, and stuff like that. And I was able to use CDML to provide some of that. So,
yeah. Very cool.
Yeah.
Like I say, it was very good.
Thanks,
excellent
Ron.
presenting and good topic. And I think you covered a lot for people that are just getting started will get a lot from this. So this was great.
Well, I
Thanks.
appreciate it. And I definitely appreciate the feedback because, I mean, halfway through, I started feeling like I am just like all over the place.
No.
Wasn't sure
That
if I
was
was-
great.
Okay.
No, that was great.
Well,
Thanks.
I appreciate it.
Bye-bye.
Thanks. Bye.
All right. Y'all have a great day and hopefully we'll see you next time.
All right. Thanks.
Bye.